airfield. So, why are we doing this? We're having a Women's History Month event. Usually pretty self-explanatory, but for the 94th especially, I don't think we do stuff like this too often, and I'd like to make this a yearly thing, so I'm really excited you guys all came out. We produce an incredible amount of female aviators out of this squadron alone, and a lot of them end up going down the fighter track and having really successful careers, and I think that's worth celebrating and talking about, so thank you for showing up for this. I'm new here, so I've only been here for a few months. I've gotten to know quite a few of you already, but I have gotten so many questions from females and males alike about what is the fighter track like? What is, basically what is the lifestyle like in different types of platforms? What is getting married and being joint spouse like? What is having kids and like as far as flying? What kind of impact does that have, especially on females? Unfortunately, I'm not married, I don't have kids, and I never flew a fighter, so I can answer half of those questions. So I don't like not having answers for you guys, so I decided we're going to do something like this, and I'd like to do this a little more regularly, and I got an incredible panel of very impressive women who are a lot cooler than I am to come and talk to you guys. So this is supposed to be a real informal event, that's why I have you in civilian clothes eating pizza. This is a conversation. Ask whatever questions you are looking to ask, and be frank, right? This is an opportunity for you to hear the stuff that you don't necessarily get to read in, all of the briefs that you get about different platforms. So, quick intro to all the gals we have here today. We have Brigadier General Michelle Kilgore. She's up here from Northcom NORAD. She was a USAFA grad in 1992. She did 12 years of active duty and then went Guard. She has flown a lot of stuff. She has over 3,900 hours in the F-16 Charlie, F-16J models, the EA-6 Bravo, MQ-9, KC-10 Alpha, C-12 Foxtrot and Juliet, and the LC-130 Hotel. She led the 109th Airlift Wing. So if you don't know what an LC-130 hotel model is, those are the really cool 130s with the skis on them that work out of like the South Pole. So I think that is the only airlift wing in the world that does that mission, which is pretty awesome. Next we have Lieutenant Colonel Colleen Cameron. Everybody should know her. She's one of our amazing reservists. She flew 130. She actually was a civil engineering officer before she went reserves. They sent her to fly 130. She did UPT out of, where did you go? Vance and Corpus Christi. So kind of a different experience there. And then joined the reserves and down at the 70th has been flying gliders and is an amazing IP here for us. We have retired Lieutenant Colonel Allison Peck, and she was a grad in 2000. She did UPT at Shepherd, so for folks trying to go to Shepherd, she's a great person to talk to. She flew A-10s, T-38s, and the E-11 and the DA-20, so another huge spread of platforms for you to talk about. Finally, we have retired Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Fujimoto. A lot of you probably know her from teaching AV 100 and 400 up here at the Hill. She went to Laughlin for UPT and actually faked out of there doing T-37s and then flew Strike Eagles, so F-15 Eagles. So, any questions on those immediately? Otherwise, I'm going to open the floor to you, ma'am. You guys can kind of go down the row and talk a little bit about yourselves.
Awesome. So I'm the old person, as you can tell from the panel, and a lot of that history of flying is, if you consider what was going on in history. So when I got here in '88, right out of high school, think Cold War, Russia was the big, my roommate was minoring in Russian. There was no such, every base in Europe was still open, Cold War, nuke alert. We did our summer trip, the 2-week trip, if they still do that. We went to Barksdale where all the bombers were still on nuclear alert. We were 2 degrees was when Desert Storm kicked off. Most of you probably weren't alive. We're playing volleyball down there, and they make a big announcement. All cadets are recalled to the cadet area. Turn on CNN, and there's the war, kicking off. So pretty much most of my Air Force career was CENTCOM based. So I'm so old that women couldn't go to Shepherd in 1992 when we graduated. In fact, we sat in the Lectinar H2 over there, and the chief of staff came in, and this was in like would have been like M40. I don't know if it's still counted the same way, but it was like the last lesson before finals in the winter. And at the time, it was 2.0 and go. All you had to do was get a 2.0, you could go to UPT. The way we have the biggest class in history, 1992, and we started with almost like 1,500 people. So we had a lot of people in it. If you didn't want to go to pilot training, you had to go see the soup. If you were PQ'd and you didn't want to go to pilot training, you had to go see the soup. So I only came here to be a pilot. My dad was a pilot in Vietnam, and my grandfather was in the Navy as well. So I'm like, fine, 2-0 and go. I can totally do that for 4 years. That's all I got to do. We sit over there in the lectionary, and the chief of staff, which is kind of a big deal, 4-star, you know, comes down and someone in a room just like this with soaring IPs, and one of the girls in our class said, do you think combat will ever be open for women? And the chief of staff of the Air Force said, and you can Google this, it's on the record, and he said, I will take a underqualified male before I will ever take an overqualified female fighter pilot. And this isn't like a story in the newspaper, this isn't like on social media, this is like the 4-star chief of staff of the Air Force. So I was like, that's it, I'm doing my min number of hours I need to get, and then I'm getting out of the Air Force because this guy's a jackass. And so then, now the Air Force is starting to downsize, right? Because we're starting to close all the bases overseas, and so they go, oh yeah, that whole thing about 2-0 and go, are bad. Only the top X number of you are gonna get to go. So then, like, with 1 semester to go to pilot training, they decide that only the top X number of people are gonna go, right? So all the nerds like me are like, yes, I need it. And so as a result of that, the UPT select, so women couldn't go to Shepherd because women couldn't fly fighters. You couldn't even go to Shepherd. In fact, you couldn't even take certain aero classes here because those aero classes were set aside for fighter pilots. And so this is 92, this is not like 62, okay? This is like not that long ago. So I ended up going to Columbus, and women can't fly fighters, so that's how I ended up, I started flying KC-10. So I still flew 37s, 38s, number 2 out of 35 in my class, this will be important later, DG, and so the guys in front of me and behind me all got fighters, but the girls couldn't take fighters. So I flew KC-10s for my first assignment, and then fast forward, like I said, the Air Force is gonna downsize for pretty much my entire career. So then I was a captain, so I flew KC-10s and then I flew C-12s in Korea. That's how I got those 2 assignments. So if you're keeping track, 3 engine heavies, 2 engine props, and then they said, oh my God, we are short fighter pilots. We're like, yeah, no kidding, because look how you've been treating people, right? So then they said, hey, if you graduated in this window and you were a DG and you went to pilot training with 38s, we'll pick you up out of Air Mobility Command and we'll drop you into Air Combat Command. Like, you can't even do that anymore. And so I looked, and at this time, combat exclusion had been repealed, and women were starting to be allowed to take fighters. So I looked at the math, and I'm like, I'm in this window. I went to pilot training, I was a DG, I could have had a fighter, and so all I had to do was go to 38. So I applied for the program. They took 150 people, so there's 150 people around my age now who have this weird background where we probably flew tankers or 130s, C-17s, helos, a couple guys flew helos, and then we were able to cross flow. It was called AMC cross flow, fly and go into F-16s. So that's why I ended up in the F-16. So I flew F-16s overseas in Japan, and then by this point now 9/11 happens. Now we have too many pilots again, and now they're like kicking people out. And so, and my dad, like I said, my dad was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and I was like, I'll go fly anything you want, just don't send me, no offense, back to the academy to teach. I'm like, don't send me anywhere non-flying, I'll go anywhere in the world, just keep me flying. So I got to go to the Navy and fly A6s for the Navy for an assignment, and then I started to sense that my luck was going to run out. So an F-16 unit in New York was hiring. I knew I could get back to the F-16 if I went to the Guard. So I honestly never wanted to leave active duty. I loved flying. I loved traveling all over the world. I was single. So that's how I ended up in the Guard. So people will go like, why'd you go to the Guard? Like, you had all these opportunities. And I'm like, looking back, yes, but at the time, the Air Force was really downsizing. If you done things that these guys probably don't even remember, if you didn't have a master's, you wouldn't make major. If you didn't sign the UPT bonus, you were grounded. I mean, there were some crazy things that they were doing because we had so many pilots. So I just sort of got disenchantized with it, and I was like, fine, I can go back to the Guard and fly F-16s, and all I have to do is fly, sign me up. So I ended up flying F-16s for another 10 years. That took me all the way almost to 20. 20 years, and I almost made it, and then that unit converted to MQ-9s. So 3-engine heavies, 2-engine props, single-engine fighter. What's next? Unmanned. So that's how I ended up. So if I could just get a B-52 somewhere in there, I'd be doing really good. So that's how I ended up in the MQ-9 unit. And then by that point, I was like, it's time to do staff and all that. So I did my staff jobs. And then I'm from New York, which has 6 wings, and now we have no more fighters. And so the boss called, he's like, hey, can you be the wing commander of this C-130 unit? And I was like, you couldn't pick a plane I already flew? Like, you got a lot to choose from, right? And he's like, we don't have any of those platforms. So he's like, have you ever been on a 130? And I'm like, I think so. I think I've been on one like twice. So that's how I ended up as the commander of the unit that goes to the South Pole and to the Arctic with the skis on it. So off I go to Little Rock. So now I've got 4-engine props, as well as all the other stuff, and I commanded that unit for 3.5 years, and then now I'm in the nerd world of Pentagon and staff. So I say that to be like, if I had a byline for my career or my life, I would say like that the Air Force that you're in now will not be the Air Force that you lead 20 or 30 years from now, and also opportunities when people say something can't be done or that there's no way. Like, I just don't ascribe to that, and I can just point to the path that I saw and the people that I know that have very similar stories of doors that opened that weren't there, the door didn't even exist when we were like cadets. And so I just say that to say like, so I sit here as someone who planned to do the 7 years and get out, and 34 years later I'm still in. So that's it.
Thanks. So I'm just a little bit younger than her. Don't let the rank fool you. Even though I'm much lower in rank. But I love listening to that because I can remember too when women then were allowed to go in combat, and I can remember before we were and the BS reasons that were given by men, but why we could not. You know what I mean? So it's just like a good reminder of all the changes that we've seen. So I did not attend the academy. I did Air Force ROTC to pay for college. And I thought for sure I was gonna do my 5-year commitment and get out. And I ended up going into civil engineering. I had no intention of flying. And I actually loved CE. So if there's anybody who ends up in CE, I thought it was fabulous. I had a ton of fun. And while I was in CE, I met a pilot, and he never worked. He flew 141s at McCord, and I was working really hard in CE, and he was playing basketball. And then he would just travel, and then he would get home and just play more basketball. So I was like, I probably should have looked into this pilot thing. So I ended up getting my private pilot's license just on my own to see if it was fun. And it was so fun. So then I decided I should have tried to do this while I was in the Air Force. So I got the reserves to send me to pilot training. So that's how I ended up along this track. So you never know. Like, there's lots of different ways to do it. I feel like I kind of just followed my folly, and it's worked out awesome. But I flew C-130s in the reserve unit at Peterson, and I loved that. I loved being here. I loved flying the C-130. I loved having a crew, and I was perfectly suited for that. Then I started having babies, and I thought I still wanted to deploy. I just knew I was going to want to, and I had it all planned out, and sometimes plans don't go the way you think they're going to, and I decided I didn't want to leave as much anymore. So I did a stint at the prep school. I taught there for a little bit, and I was just trying to get my foot in the door at the 70th at the airfield. And I would do whatever it took. So I was there exact there for 2 years, and now I'm in the gliders. And that's it. So lots of reserve time.
I'm Jen Fujimoto, so I graduated from here in 1998. I ran track and cross country, and whenever I came to the academy, I was not pilot qualified. half inch too short. So for those of you guys out there, there's still a chance. Okay, so behavioral sciences major, made it all the way through the academy, and then 2 weeks prior to graduation, I got an exception to policy, which they were like, okay, every aircraft that you go fly, you gotta sit in with a flight doc and make sure that you can get full rudder and brake deflection on one side. It was very technical. No, you know, you guys get all the anthropomorphic stuff now. Back then it was just like, make sure that you can push the rudder and push the brake in any airplane. So graduated, did a little bit of casual status, and then went to pilot training at Laughlin. Stuck around there as a FAPE. Was not my first choice to be a FAPE, but it ended up being like a huge blessing, at least as I think back to my career, because the number of people that you're able to impact when you teach at that level, the number of people that you're able to kind of hold their hand and, hey, we're gonna get through this together, especially if they're struggling. And all of those different, like I failed a class here freshman year, you think about all the different failures that you've had, they kind of just, they start to help you develop your path. And where your strengths are, and you figure out how to do hard better. If you've ever listened to Kara Lawson, who's the Duke women's basketball coach, listen to that. But from there, excelled at pilot training, and then after being a FAPE, picked Strike Eagles. My husband is also a Strike Eagle guy. Went to Lakenheath from there, so joint spouse assignment, and then went to Hickam, where I worked on the staff at the AOC. So being able to kind of step out of that tactical world for a little bit and kind of come up to the operational level, I felt was key in helping me understand how all of these parts and pieces fit together. Went back to the had 2 kids while I was on staff, like we were on a timeline, and you will find that sometimes. But then back to the Strike Eagle from there, and then eventually, you know, like there's different paths that you take, different doors open, or different doors close in your face, and then little windows open. You're like, okay, I'm gonna step through this and realize that not everybody has to be on the same path to the same destination. And so from there, kind of swapped and went to the TACP community. And so I was a commander in Korea at the 604th ASOS when it was up at Camp Red Cloud, which is a tiny little postage stamp about 13 miles south of the DMZ. And the people that I got to work with there, absolutely incredible. And it was another piece to my puzzle in terms of understanding. I understood the tactical level in the Strike Eagle. I understood the operational level at the AOC. Now I was given another piece of that puzzle, being with a TACP unit and the JTACs on the ground and learning their perspective as well. From that point, then swapped and went over to ACCA 5, which works F-35 requirements. And that was a whole nother ball game of learning, whether it was the budget side or new technology side, and getting to work with the test community. But as I look back, and there were some really hard seasons in there, some really hard lessons learned, some really hard leadership lessons, and trying to figure out how you get this group of people to all drive towards a common goal. But every single one of those kind of successes, if you will, you look back and you see all of the different failures or all of the things that you learned kind of the hard way along the way in order to put you into that position. And all of those different assignments kind of led me to that point where I'm like, okay, I understand the things that I'm supposed to understand for this specific job. And then talking about some of the barriers that were out there with respect to females in the fighter world or females in aviation in general, I thought one of the biggest things I saw was not only the mindset, but getting to see that shift along the way. And some people were more open to that shift than others were, and that's okay, right? Like, you can't control them, you can only control how you react to those individuals. And I will say, for me, it was a lot of equipment issues, because I am small in stature, and it's disappointing to see that some of those same issues that we're still fighting through today. But what was encouraging is that for every guy that was out there that was a naysayer, there were many guys that stood in the gap whenever we faced a challenge as women. And I'm super proud of those guys, but I'm super thankful for them as well. Because I think back to equipment, and we couldn't get female flight suits, which when you're flying a fighter for 8 hours, it's either wear a diaper, dehydrate yourself, or I need a female flight suit that's gonna fit right that I can use in the aircraft so I don't dehydrate myself, okay, in order to execute the mission over Iraq. So having a squadron commander who was like, damn it, I'm gonna fix this for you guys. Yet at the same time, 2 years later, having a guy look at me and tell me, well, if you want this assignment, the two of you together as a joint spouse, I need you to get her knocked up now, which hearing that from an 06 is really creepy whenever you're a captain and you're wanting to start a family. So know that throughout your career, there's gonna be different people who are gonna be your biggest cheerleaders, and there are gonna be people that are your obstacles. That's okay. All of you guys will face that, whether you're a guy or you're a girl, okay? It's how you react to that. Are you willing to go, I'm not gonna take no for an answer, I'm gonna keep going down this path until I get to the yes, or realize that this is the path that I went on, but it can still lead to the destination that I wanna be in. All right, that's it.
Allison Paddock, I was a 2000 grad. I met my husband on the first day of basic training. We were in the same squadron our first 2 years, but we didn't get married or date even till much later. But I was a cadet glider IP when I was here as well, so it's kind of cool. I graduated, went off to grad school for a year at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. From there I went to Shepherd for pilot training, got A-10s out of there, and then after A-10 training ended up going to Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina, which is closed now, one of those old people. And that's where my husband and I kind of reconnected. He was flying A-10s there as well, and we got married a year after I arrived there. So flew A-10s there. Our next assignment, we flew T-38s at Shepherd as instructors. So back to Shepherd, and that's where I had our first son in 2008, so he's almost 15 now. And that was like a pretty interesting experience because like no one knew what to do with me. It wasn't very common at that point that women flying ejection seats got pregnant in flying assignments. A lot waited till staff, and it just wasn't something that I wanted to wait for. And so I had a commander that was like, so are you gonna like get out now? I'm like, no, I'm sticking around. I had kind of the flying squadron commander that was like, well, I'm not gonna leave you in this job, which was silly. He's like, you need to move somewhere else where, you know, less around students or something. And I'm like, no. And he was a Dutch commander, so that was a whole different dynamic with the Europeans at Shepherd at the time, because they don't always have like the same, you know, number of females in their military and different rules and all of that. So it was kind of a challenging experience. Flight docs didn't know really what to do with me. It was just, it kind of sucked. Yeah. And so after that, we went back to A-10s. Our kind of objective from that point was to spend as much time as we could together as a family. So we took almost 2.5-year assignment to Korea so we could get our short tour credit and take our son with us. So he got, as a 1.5-year-old, got issued his Israeli-made gas mask when he arrived. So that was cool. So we spent 2.5 years there, both flying in the A-10. I got pregnant again towards the end of that assignment. And then we went to Tucson after that. My husband was flying with the FT there, and then I was at the AF South AOC. Had my second son there. And then from that assignment, we went back to the T-38. We were at Randolph, so I was at T-38 pilot instructor training there, teaching the IPs that you guys will have when you go off to fly T-38s. And then from there, I ended up back here through some pretty fluky circumstances and was the commander down at IFT for a bit. And then I finished up back where I started at the airfield, flying gliders. And I retired about 1.5 years ago. Since retirement, I have not done a whole lot other than being a mom to my kids. But I do volunteer with a refugee resettlement organization in town, and I just started another master's degree. I'm not sure if I regret that. But totally different direction as a Master of Science in Humanitarian Action, so very different path there. And if you guys also have questions, like with the Career Intermission Program, if you've heard of that, have any questions, my husband actually did that at about the 17-year point in his career, went and flew with UPS for a year and a half, came back, finished his commitment for that, as well as his time till retirement, and he's back flying with UPS now. So I'll talk to you a little bit to that as well. That's it.
Alright, and then there's me, Kat Westfall, here I am. Who heard me give the Capes brief? Anybody? Oh, most of you haven't? Okay, cool. So, my background is not quite as shiny and nice as theirs. I struggle bust the whole way through the academy. Academics almost killed me. And then when it was time to put down what assignments or what jobs I wanted, I had no idea if I wanted to fly or not. So I was like, I'll put pilot, see how it goes. If I wash out, whatever. If I quit, whatever. I'll go be an intel officer and go live my best life. So went through IFT, and that was, I had zero flight experience. I had never touched a stick in my life. That was an education. And then started T6s and really kind of had to sit down and go, oh my God, do I want to stick with this? So kind of had that sit down talk to myself, decided, yeah, I am going to stick this out and I'm going to get good at it. So kind of had to work my way through flight school and figure out how to fly on the fly. That was a load of fun. So yeah, finished probably middle, bottom half of my class. So I got an airplane. At the time they were still giving out RPAs like it was candy. So I was just happy I got an airplane at that point. I've been like the only female in everything I've done since I've started. I was the only female in my class. I was the only female pilot at my MWS in my squadron for the entire time I was there, for about 7 years. So I know what it is like to be alone and unafraid, and dealing with people who aren't necessarily used to you being there. So anyway, after pilot training, where I went to Columbus, so if you have any questions on Columbus, it's a cute little town. But I got picked up for the E8C J-Stars. Nobody ever knows what that is because there was only 16 of them in the Air Force, and now most of them are retired. I helped close down my squadron before I came out here. They are getting rid of them. But they are part of the Iron Triad. They're a C2 ISR asset. I won't go into all the mission capes of that, but do lots of secret squirrel stuff, a lot of political missions. We work a lot with the Army, hence Joint is in the name for Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System. Yeah, and I really didn't kind of hit my stride until I got to my MWS, and then once I figured out how to fly and that I loved flying, God help the bastards in all my upgrade classes because they never got DG again. Yeah, once I started loving flying and enjoying it, then success just kind of follows you. So I had a great time in that platform, loved what I did, and had a lot of success there. Yeah, so I was there for almost 7 years. Like I said, I was the only gal in town for a while, and that comes with its own challenges, mostly because sometimes there are just things that guys, they don't have to think about, right? So if you're in a community where it is not even 10% women, there are things that people just don't think about that you may need or that affects you. Things like uniforms, things like having a pumping room for mothers.
So you don't get walked in on.
Yeah, right? So there's just things that they don't think about. And so I want to say, like, I'm really grateful that there are guys in this room today because it is a 10% female aviation force, not if that. And so many of you are going to be flight commanders, squadron commanders. So even if you don't think that, or guys don't think that the female perspective applies to them, you're going to be responsible for people in your unit who don't look like you, who have problems that you don't necessarily have to deal with yourself. And so the fact that you are willing to be here and listen and learn about that and be able to apply that when you become leaders is huge. Because as a 10% female force, we can sit there all day and go, we need these changes, we need these things in order to operate and execute the mission. If we don't have male support in a 90 to 10 ratio, then we're never going to make those changes. So it is huge that you guys are here and that you are supporting your female peers. Awesome. So, and that's all. That's my spiel for now. you guys want to, we'll open the floor for questions. Hit us up.
Ma'am, would you like me to take the camera?
Depends on the question.
Okay.
If you want an honest answer, probably.
All right, got it.